Welcome to special Kinus Torah, We have, Baruch Hashem, a very impressive lineup of Pasha speakers. So we try to give everyone enough time. So I'll be Makater, and I have to call up the Rebbe Shliach, Rabbi Perlman, to start us off.
Shkoyach. I've been to Rosh Chodesh, and I just got text over here that Rosh Chodesh Cheshvan, which starts tonight, is Chaim Smeichim V'Amoy Nisim. Please, somebody just texted it to me. That's what Cheshvan stands for. And of course, we just entered second month of Tafshin Pei Gimel. We all know Tafshin Pei Gimel is Teshnas Plois Gdolos, but simultaneously we can take it from a different direction. Teshnas Progresses Geder. So let's burst forward with Yiddishkeit. The Parsha of this week, the Parsha of Noach, is the fourth stage since Tafshin Lamed Ches of Yaakov Alach L'Darko. Yaakov Alach L'Darko, we all know that it was popular in Lubavitch. 3 rounds. Round number 1 of departure from the event of the New Year, of the Shana Chadasha, started on Yom Kippur. That's the first departure, which was Yaakov Alach L'Darko, Motzei Yom Kippur. And then, obviously, we're not completely home, because Yom Kippur, we're going our way to get ready for Sukkot. So we're still busy with all the mitzvahs. We're so busy that we don't have too much time to really go on our way. So there comes stage number 2. After Sukkot and by the Simchas Torah, we're on number 2. And over there we're busy with Kinus Torah, which obviously will be, if we're being Cheder over here, we'll be in the Sifta here, then there'll be the proper time. Then comes a third round. That's why in 770, Kinus Torah was Motzei Simchas Torah. It was on Nisur Chag, on Wednesday. I happened to be there, so I saw it with my own eyes. And third stage is Motzei Shabbos Bereshis. So we're very close to the third stage, but we're really moving forward. As the Rebbe tells us in Tafshin Lamed Ches that there is a fourth stage. It's Parshas Noach, because now we complete Chodesh Tishrei. Now that's the whole Chodesh is already completed. So now we're really moving forward into the grinding board, so to speak. And being that this is talking about going forward, Rebbe Tzir Chamushka had a nurse, and that nurse walked in one time all wet. And she was asked, why did you take an umbrella? She said, I learned it from the Rebbe. The Rebbe taught me that you don't use an umbrella. He says, what are you talking about? Well, when the Rebbe went to Beit Israel, when the Rebbe was recuperating from a broken leg, maybe it was Beit Israel, whichever hospital it was, the Rebbe came out of the car and was pouring rain, and the Rebbe walked in between the car and the entrance of the hospital, and the rain was coming down, and the Rebbe walked in without an umbrella, all soaked. And that's when she asked the Rebbe, Rebbe, you can't afford an umbrella? She had the chutzpah to ask that question point blank. As Rebbe said, am I going to take away from the Eibishter, put a mechitza between the bracha we get from the Eibishter? I'm going to block this bracha? I'm accepting it full-heartedly. And if the Rebbe said it's a bracha to walk in the rain, I'll do the same. So now that we have entered Rosh Chodesh Mar Cheshvan, there is an interesting Medrash Pliya that talks about Rosh Chodesh. It talks about Sukkot. It talks about all the times which you say Yalav Yalav. And this Medrash Pliya is connected to the Parsha of this week, the Parsha of Noach. We all know that in the Parsha of Noach, Noach was given an order who to bring it to the Teva. And by looking at the order that was given, which was today's Chitas, is the message in that Medrash Pliya. When do we say the full Alam? What does the Medrash say? If we read a pasuk, Shnayim Ba'u El Noach El HaTeva, 2 by 2 that came to Noach into the Teva, this pasuk is for us in Golus, not in Eretz Yisrael. All of us who say the Hallel on Rosh Chodesh, we say Chatzi Hallel, only half Hallel, or any other occasions which do not fit into this pasuk. So what does this pasuk say? Shnayim, meaning 2, the 2 days of Pesach. That's only 2 days we say the full Hallel. And then Shnayim again, says the Medrash Pliya, is the 2 days of Shavuos. Ba'u El Noach will be the next 2. Ba'u rather. Ba'u is the third one. Base Aleph Vav, the Gematria is 9. Base 1, 2 rather, Aleph is 1, and Vav is 6. It's the 9 days that we just completed from Sukkot to Simchas Torah. El Noach is the Gematria Chanukah. So you see that's only for occasion we say the full Hallel according to the Medrash. So obviously today today whether we're studying Rosh Chodesh, tomorrow morning we're going to say the Hallel, we know that we're not going to say the full Hallel. So this praise of the Eibishter, which will give us a year of all the brachas.
Thank you, Rabbi Broman. We have with us a Hashem Maggid Shir in Kingston, multiple Moistes, Shulz, Rabbi Berkowitz, share with us in the Torah.
Koyach. Derech Klar, when it comes to Yoni Halacha, the rule of Hasidim from the times of the Baal Shem Tov, Hasipur Hayadur, when we get to the Sukkah of the Baal Shem Tov, is that when it comes to others, you have to search to be Makir. When it comes to yourself, you have to look to be Machmir. It's a general rule. It's also based on a famous story with the Baal Shem Tov, Sheina Kana Makom Laharich, but one student saw another student doing something at Rosh Hashanah that he felt it wasn't according to the standard of his friend. He was taking out a shmek tabak on Rosh Hashanah, and it was Mo'ir Dinim, and a whole story with the Baal Shem Tov, until this chassid, he took away his moichin, and then later he came up with a limud schos on it. The question that we're going to deal with today is, and again, it's a sugya klalis about the proper positioning of a person when he davens, and more specifically, what he's allowed to hold in his hands when he davens. And the hashlochas that come out from this, especially today in the new age that we live in, when people are holding different type of kelim, bikelim shoinim, meshunim, they're holding these different things. The question is if it's allowed api halacha to hold this. Now, believe it or not, at the end of the Tkufa of the Rishonim, there was somebody who asked a question. He was asked a question. This famous Trumas Hadeshin. He was one of the last of the Rishonim, beginning of the Tkufa Achreinim. He was asked a question. At that time, there was the beginning of the printing of Sidurim, and he was asked a question. And this is in Siman Yud Zayin of the Shalos Trumas Hadeshin. The question was, since there is clear, we're going to soon get into it, as seemingly markers in the Gemara that it's also for a person to hold things while he's davening. So the question is, yes, listapik in tzarach lizar nami shalayachiz machzer in tvila biyadi lisbala behem. And by Rosh Hashanah, the Yom Kippurim, shrei b'nei Adam ein misbalim b'chutz As Ein Tzarech L'Zar, you have to be careful like Yagam. He wants to know if you're allowed to hold the siddur in your hands when you daven. This is a question that was brought up to him, and it's a short tshuva, and he goes back and forth trying to analyze the different things. But just to think about this, that you're middle of davening, and there's a question if you're allowed to even hold the siddur, what's this based on? So let's take a little journey back to the Shayrish of how a person is supposed to be davening. So there's a Braisa in the Masechtas Brachos of Chav Gimel where the Gemara says as follows: Torah Rabbanon, the Tanoim, they taught Vayechaz Adam Tefillin B'Yadim. And when a person is davening, he's not even allowed to hold a pair of tefillin in his hands. I mean, we're not talking about their anu, as a person is davening shacharis and he's wearing his tefillin. We're talking about holding a bag with tefillin. Likewise, Sefer Torah B'Zrayai, or he's holding a Torah, like Shem and Torah Yisbal. What's the reason for this? Says Rashi, Shein Daitim Yeshavas Allah B'Tefillin. When a person is going to be holding the tefillin or the Sefer Torah, his mind is not going to be settled on him. Shari Libay Tamid Aleim Shalayiplam Yadi. His mind and his heart is going to be constantly thinking about these things, and he won't have the ability to have kavanah in his tefillah. The Gemara then continues and says, Amar Shmuel, Sakin u'mayis v'kairo v'kikar. What about things like a sakin, a knife, mais, money, kaira, a plate, kikar, loaves of bread? So he says, Elu ki yotze b'hem. Rashi gives the explanation that he's afraid that they're going to get ruined, they're going to fall, the plate's going to get spilled over, but the kikar is going to go into the dust, and it's going to get ruined. Tosfos, with this Tosfos is in Sukkah, which we're going to learn soon, the Sukkah over there, and just mention what it speaks about. A Gemara in Sukkah, where it discusses having a lulav in your hand when you're davening. So Tosfos asks, what is the reason of Shmuel? What is he adding to what we said before? Vayechaz Adam Tefillin L'chayra. If you can't have kavanah with a davar shebekdusha, then what's the svara? So he says, I would have thought because they're so heilig, they're zoy and kisvei kodesh, so I would have thought that it's only on such a thing that a person can hold in his hands. But if it's dvarim shabachol, since in the end of the day is meretach v'gin afrum yid and eilich yid, he won't lose his kavanah, he won't lose his head over this. So that's what Shmuel says. That's what the chiddush of Shmuel is, that even dvarim shabachol, a person's mind will not be able to be properly focused, and he's going to end up dropping it. So based on this Gemara and this explanation of the Rishonim and Rashi and Tosfos, it comes out that a person, when he's davening, if he's going to be holding on to things, it's going to distract his ability from davening properly, because he's holding something which is going to automatically divert his attention away from what he's supposed to be doing, which is thinking that he's standing in front of the Eibishter, and instead he's going to think about the things that he's holding. You can take this even a step further. We know we just had it in the Radvaz. If you look in the Rambam, the end of his Suri Mizbeach, he says that the Rambam is known to have an unbelievable seder in the Svarim of the Rambam, and he writes that he is so nispal every time he learns the Rambam that he's able to be kol mini mesachtes halachis achadim on one pedic, and he's so nishtoimim. So he writes this when he gets to the halachas of the karbonis, how he was able to be melakit so much, and such a power of a person's human head to be able to learn so much. It's an interesting thing in Hilchas Tefillah. We know that the Rambam also was very, very mesuder, very meduyik. So if you look in Perek Daled, the Rambam is speaking about the things that a person has to do as achana l'tefillah. And he mentions over there different things about being hungry, being tired. But then he speaks about, in Perek K, about how a person has to prepare himself in his body, how he has to prepare himself in his guf, and other things. And in that Perek is where the Rambam speaks about, like when a person is, the first Perek is about Chana L'Guf, and the other one is about how a person is supposed to stand in front of the Eibishter, the proper Mokim, Naki, V'chulu, Guf Naki. So in that context, the Rambam writes that when a person is davening, he shouldn't hold things in his hands. So sometimes I want to say that the Rambam holds that when you're standing in front of a king, you have to ask yourself, what is the proper way to stand? And this, if you look carefully at the Lashon of Alter Rebbe in Sif Aleph, Siman Tzadik Vav, where the Alter Rebbe speaks about these halachas. The Alter Rebbe, by the way, brings over there the tshuva of the tshuva sadeshem, and the Alter Rebbe writes, if it's normal and considered to be a normal thing. So when you stand in front of a king, you should not have anything in your hands, and you should have your hands fusim yodei al yaminei al yad smoilei, and they should be over you, over your heart, if it's the derech. And then he continues and he says, no, Kabbalah, your thumbs should be folded in, and then he says, on top of that, it shouldn't be stam one on top of the other, but it should be from the Arizal, from the Tishrei Arizal, it says you should have your right on the top of your hand, and the back part should be facing your face. But again, I'm not sure if the Alter Rebbe in the second part is a hemshech to the first part, where he says it has to be normal, that when you're standing in front of a king, that's the proper way to stand. But the Alter Rebbe brings that in Shulchan Aruch, that this is the way the Mekubalim says. It's not in the regular Shulchan Aruch. The Alter Rebbe brings this down. L'maisa, we saw that the Rebbe did not have his hands up on his chest. The Rebbe just had his hands down. And the Siddur also wasn't in the Rebbe's hands. The Siddur was on the Siddur. I don't know if this is a raya or not to anything. But Al-Kaponim, the Nekuda is that the Alter Rebbe then brings this question of Negea to having a Siddur in his hand. And over here, l'chayre, based on what we learned earlier, it seems to have a problem. So what would be a svara that should allow a person to hold a siddur? So this is based on a Gemara in the Masechta Sukkah, Daf Mem Aleph on the base. Gemara over there, Stam, as I mentioned, how one of the Tanoim, I think it was Rabbi Gamliel, he bought a esrik for $1,000. Because it's the whole sugi over there, the Gemara is discussing about Matana Manas Lahachzer, and that they were passing it around, they couldn't afford it, and then Agavorch in the Braise mentions that he was passing around, giving a Matana Manas Lahachzer for something that was 1,000 zuz, elov zuz. So the Gemara says, what was the point of that? To teach us, the Gemara says that the mitzvahs chavivis aleim, the mitzvahs were so chaviv to them, they were ready to pay a hay nasak in order to do the mitzvah. The Gemara then continues in the Hemshech of the Sugi and says as follows: Omar Leimar Meimar L'Ravashi. So Ravashi was the one that was saying this over it. He said, Abba, my father, my father, when he used to daven on Sukkis, he used to hold the lulav in his hands the whole davening. Not only mitzad hakel, but because of chavivusa the mitzvah, he was so excited. Frag the Yomara Meisvei, how can you say this? How can he daven? How did Rameimar daven with a lulav whole davening? Didn't we learn in the Mishnah, in the Braise and Brachas, and then Shmuel said, Sakim, Mekaira, Kikar, Mois, so we see that there's a thing that's distracting to a person. The Gemara answers, Hasam lav mitzvah minu. When it comes to holding the Sefer Torah, there's no actual mitzvah in holding a Sefer Torah. There's no mitzvah in holding tefillin. Shenkin on Sukkis, there's a mitzvah to hold the lulav. There's a shulyan, a gillion, and a sikha from the Rebbe Chelik Yates, where the Rebbe doesn't understand what the mitzvah is, because even according to the minig of Anshe B'Shalayim, where they used to walk around the whole day with their lulav and esrig, the Rebbe says, but it's l'chol adayis, the moment that you picked it up, kivan da'agbei, you're already yotzi dechivasei. So it's a minig, naf, yafa. But what's the mitzvah? What's the mitzvah? But anyways, this is what the Rashi says, that it says that mitoch shechaviva mitzvah alav ein matza'a v'shemura kavid alav v'leitarit. Because he's holding it, it's a mitzvah involved. I guess maybe even tzas mitzvah is considered to be a mitzvah. So his mind is going to be on it. So the Ritva asks, what in the world does this mean? That's the reason why you shouldn't be holding it. If your mind is going to be on it, you're going to be tarid bay, so you're going to be distracting from your tefillah, and your tefillah has to be something which is muchuvin. So the Ritva is the one that asked this question. What's the pshat in the Rashi? He says, I don't understand the words. He's going to for sure make a mistake. So therefore the Ritva comes up to explain an interesting chiddush, which will help us understand at least a little bit for our question when they get to holding a siddur in your hand when you daven. And he says that since the mitzvah, this is the Ritva's chiddush, since there's a mitzvah of lulav, the lulav's mitzvah gives a person a koyach to have more focus on his davening. Because you're holding on to the lulav, it gives you a special koyach. And it's interesting that the Taz in Shulchan Aruch, in Simon Tzadik Vov, he says an interesting word. He says this also will explain why the Chazim, when you're holding by the Shabbos Mavarchim, and the Yukam Purkum, which is giving a bracha to all the Talmidei Chachamim, and to all those that are giving a the Tamchen Deiraisa, the Balo Eskim that help out the Talmidei Chacham. So the Chazan's holding the Torah. How does he hold the Torah there? So the Taz writes that since the whole thing is about Torah, so it's okay that he's holding on the Torah. Although that the Pashas you can answer, there's a chiluk between what the Shulchan Aruch, the Gemara is talking about, which is Stam Tvilah Shemini Esrei. And it happens to be to point out that the Alter Rebbe doesn't bring this in Shulchan Aruch, but the Mishnah Berurah brings it down. There's a Pri Megadim that he writes that it says Benigea Ta'ayisbalo Lav Dafke, that it means Dafke Shemini Esrei, but Hu Adim Krishma Vafilu Psukit Zimra Lididan. The Kitzur comes out according to this as follows: that when a person is doing a mitzvah, the first priority is that he has to focus on being able to have the focus on the mitzvah above the yodei. Everything else that's going to be in any way a distraction to that is outright going to be asur. Holding in your hands is just an extra step, including that would be if there's going to be things that are going to be distracting on your table. In fact, it says in Shulchan Aruch that when a person is davening, the best is that he should be part of l'kir, especially if a person knows that he has easy distraction. He has to know himself. Not everyone can stand by the mizrach. But if a person knows that he sees things that are going to distract him, so for him, he has a special chayv to stand by a door. In fact, it says, or by a wall, it says that a person should not daven outside in a field, because it's going to be distracting. He has to daven dafke in a mokim mekura, a place where there's a koyda, there's a roof on top of you. All this has to go back to the the kavanah material. So lemaisa, what comes out is like this: if a person l'chatchila, he should try to not have anything in his hands, the pashtus, let alone a siddur even from that. If he has no choice, then of course he can hold it. If it's going to help him in his kavanah, because the whole point of the davening is that siddur is there to help him daven. If a person is going to be in a place that for whatever reason he wasn't Mikayim, the Maimer HaMishnah, Chacham Eino B'Reishai, and he's stuck in a place, and now he has a problem. Or he's going to daven Baal Peh, which the Rebbe says that he saw the Rebbe, his Rebbe, the Frierdiker Rebbe, was mitnoyig dafke to daven at the siddur, and now he doesn't have a siddur. And the only thing that's available is somebody around him. He has on his phone something that can bring him to tefillah. So in such a case, if he's able to maybe put it on an airplane mode, there shouldn't be any other distractions. So in a mokim of such b'diavad, then al pi halacha we find a place and he might be able to use it. Other than that, you see the chush anir naim is that most people using it, let alone in a shul when there's siddurim readily available. Unfortunately, the opposite is true. So one should try as much as possible to Yiddish oismeiden von azamin sartan haget.
Careful, Berkowitz. For addressing such an important topic. I'm going to ask Rabbi Mendel Gorman, Magachir in the Yeshiva in the Poconos, to share with us some of the data.
This week's parsha, we read the Maisa of the Mabul, and the Eibusher commanded Noach to build a teva. And after the whole story, Noach leaves the teva, and Noach built a mizbeach. He brings karbanos, and it says, "Vayarach Hashem esriach nichoyach."